discovered, it must be told. Easily discovered, it must be told.
Thanks for tuning in. My name is Gypsy. If you missed my previous video, I did do an introduction on revamping this channel and what our conversations will be about. So I hope you will go back and watch that video just to get a synopsis of everything that we're going to be discussing here. I do want to clarify that the point of these videos is not to point fingers and like hurt people and down them. It's to express how things that really happened to me have affected me over the years. And being 34 now, I think I'm in a better position to look back at that stuff to see, like, pinpoint how that thing directly resulted in me thinking a certain way. So that my interactions with people were affected specifically in these areas of my life. It's for educational purposes, basically, is what I'm saying. This is not like a story to be like, oh, my life sucks, everybody cry with me, because actually my life doesn't suck. I have a really great life, especially when you factor in all the things that happened to me as a child. I should be like cracked out under a bridge someplace. So I don't want you guys to think that I'm villainizing people, because I'm not. My mom and dad, they met when they were both in Korea. My father was stationed with the army out there. After they got married, they came to America for a stint when my mother was pregnant with me. And then I was born in Washington State, where ironically I live right now, but I've never lived here since then. So like, I have no memories of this place. All my memories of Washington are brand new memories that were made after my move here. We came to Washington State when my mom was pregnant with me, and then I was born in the state. And then afterwards, we kind of moved around from place to place. My dad's from Philly, so we moved from here to Philly so we could be around my dad's family. I think after they went back to Korea, then my dad left the army, because I was a few months old at the time. When my early childhood memories are in Korea. I don't remember being a baby in America. That's when my mom had my sister, and she and I are like a year and a half apart in age, and she was born in Korea. I believe that we had a couple more back and forths before me and my sister were school age, but I don't remember that. I just know that it happened. We started school in Korea. My dad, apparently, at that time I didn't know, but my father had a drug problem, and he was definitely an alcoholic. I do remember knowing that he had a drinking problem. My father, he's the youngest of like 6 kids. He's very charismatic. He had the kind of personality where like you would believe it if I told you my dad was like a famous musician or something. Like, he had that kind of wildness to him. The party rock star part of him also went along with his personality, where he didn't think twice about like drinking. The drugs that he was doing, I'm sure he was probably smoking weed and shooting up heroin. My dad was really smart, very intelligent. He comes from a very like Huxtable-ish. If you guys ever watched The Cosby Show, you know what I'm talking about. His family is like the Huxtables, like his immediate household. His mom was like the head nurse at Temple University. And this was back in like the 50s. Like, black women, they're not supposed to be doing a lot of stuff that she was aspiring to. They're not supposed to have a college education. Like, they're not supposed to do that. She went for it and she did it. And then my grandfather, he was a business owner. So he started his own. First of all, he owned like multiple properties in Philly, which again, as a black man from the South, you're not supposed to be doing that. And then he started his own business, not supposed to be doing that. He had his own like a little convenience store. You know how it is in the hood. The convenience store is popping. They were like an upstanding household. Very funny. Like, he was hilarious. My dad was like a natural comic. He was a dancer. He was a singer. He was a rapper. He was a poet. He was a drummer. So many talents. The only thing he probably couldn't do was draw. But my mother was the artist. My mom actually went to college for fine arts, and graduated from a university in Korea with that degree. They were pretty intelligent people. My mom's mom only had like maybe like a 4th or 5th grade education. Somehow she like ended up owning her own business, was like the first landowner in the village that my grandmom's from. She's like the founder of our village. My mother was like the only female in that area that actually was sent to college. Like at that time when my mom was young, girls were not supposed to go to college. That just wasn't a thing. So these are not just two knuckleheads that got together, had babies, and just were like fucking up. No, these were people, regular people that met somehow, they clicked with each other, and then they tried to build a life together. But the problem was that my father was on drugs and alcohol, and my mom comes from this culture of total taboo when it comes to drugs. So even though everybody chain smoked like it wasn't shit, and drinking like they drink alcohol in Korea like it's water, like the guys do, the drinking I think wasn't so much of a big deal to my mom. There wasn't enough of a red flag because her father drank, her brother drank, everybody drank, so it wasn't really a big deal that my dad was an alcoholic. The drug use he was hiding from my mom, so she didn't really even know how to recognize drugs because she was so naive. She was in love with him because he was a very lovable guy. When we were back in Korea for like the final time, there was so much violence between my parents. My mom has a horrible temper. Like she cannot control herself when she's angry. She just yells and screams at whoever is around her. She's just like, she loves to yell. I think that my mother has Asperger's as well, based on everything I know about autism and how to recognize the signs now, which I saw those signs in my son, and I had him evaluated, so he was also diagnosed. Because my mom, and she was really smart, she did good in school, I don't think that people attributed some of her mental issues as being part of a disorder. And back then, of course, what the heck is autism? Like nobody even knew what autism was. So unless it was really severe, nobody was paying attention to you. So she didn't really know how to cope. She didn't know how to deal with my father when he was in his rages, and she would just go back and forth with him like and try to argue with him. She didn't even speak good English. Like I don't even know how. Like my mom can curse you out. Like English is her first language. That's the only thing she can do well in English is cuss at you. I remember their blow up arguments when it got really bad. I remember my dad like grabbing my mom by the throat and then pushing her up against the wall and just her legs dangling off the ground, and he would like push her into the wall like this, and I would be so scared that she was gonna like choke to death and just die. I remember it's hard for me to talk about this stuff out loud because I have never talked about this stuff with anybody except my sister and my husband and sometimes my son. But the memory of it, like playing it back in my mind, it's bringing up the feelings of fear that I had when it was happening. It's really scary when you're a little kid and you're looking at your parents and thinking like one of them is going to die because the other person hurt them. You don't know what to do. And I remember this one time my mom and dad were fighting at my grandmom's house. The fight got so bad that my mom actually ran into the kitchen, grabbed like a big steak knife, and she ran across the room towards my dad with it. I just remember being petrified that she was gonna stab him to death. And my mother has 4 younger sisters. They would basically leave us at my grandmom's house to be babysat. So I think my parents were probably over at the house to come pick us up maybe, or drop us off. My aunts tackled her, like they just jumped on her. I don't remember how many of my aunts were there. I don't remember which aunts specifically. And they got the knife away from her and somehow broke up the fight. If I asked them if they remember, I don't even know that they would say that they do. I remember this clearly, and I know my sister and my mom remember because I feel like we talked about it since it happened. Those incidents are the most like clear, vibrant memories of the two of them fighting that I know firsthand. I witnessed. But again, because when you're a child, you don't know how to process this stuff. A lot of those memories, your brain will just block them. Your brain will somehow fuzzy them enough so that you can't go back and pull the memory up to the surface anymore. You just know vaguely that it happened, but you can't remember the details. This is one of the things that have really affected me because, oh man, I'm telling you, when I would talk about some of the stuff with my dad's side of the family, sometimes you could hear the denial in their voice. They didn't want me to admit out loud that my dad had a drug problem. They don't like to hear stories about him beating my mom. Like, they think my mom just made it all up. She was just saying it for attention, which could be believable because of my mom's erratic personality. But those specific things, I vouch her 100% because I was there. It happened in front of me. One of the problems when it comes to the whole domestic violence thing is that the victim, she's in love with the person who's doing this to her. So, like, it's always easy for people to say, why didn't you leave? Why didn't you run away? Yeah, that's easier said than done. When you're married to this person, you have children with this person, all these promises this person makes you when they're sober, when they're in their right mind, which is most of the time. They're coherent, they're sweet, they're charming, they're apologetic. They treat you like a princess. Again, this can go both ways, both genders or even same-sex couples go through this too. So don't think that this is just a man on woman crime. Please, all you Me Tooers and feminists, relax in the comments. This is not a man bashing session. That's not what this is. It doesn't have nothing to do with your gender. It has to do with your personality. I and my sister is a girl, and as adults, we have mirrored some of these behaviors in our past relationships, fighting and arguing and being violent with our partners because we saw this growing up. And you think this is normal behavior. When you get angry, you're supposed to yell. When you get angry and they don't listen to you, when your yelling isn't scaring the person enough to take you serious, then you start throwing things. Like, this is what you tell yourself is okay behavior, but it's not. But this was my dad's way of coping. When he would get upset, he would lose his temper. My mom didn't help because she would just go back and forth with him. Like, the two of them would straight up be trying to knock each other out. It's not going to lead to anything positive, but it's so toxic, but they can't get away from each other because they're too in love. They're too emotionally bound. They're too financially dependent on one another. They're sharing assets. You know, they're committed. It's just they cannot control themselves when they are angry. I think it's important for people to understand that domestic violence victims, there's so many more out there than people who openly talk about it, because most people can't talk about it until it's over. If you're going through it, you're just constantly in a state of denial because you have to survive. You have to tell yourself it's not as bad as it seems, because otherwise, you have to start from scratch. You have to figure out how you can start your life all over again, because this person is just immersed in everything you're doing. Most people live with their abusers. Most people are financially tied to their abusers. Most people have children they have to split custody of with their abusers. It's not that simple to just walk away. I never ask people, why didn't you run away? I don't ask people that when I hear these stories. My whole thing is, if you're someone who is questioning whether you are possibly going through it, sometimes that person is not physically hurting you so damagingly that it seems like an emergency. It seems like it's life and death. It could just be just enough violence to justify to yourself that it's a fight. We're just in a fight. But that's not normal behavior. That's not healthy behavior. You should not have to physically fight somebody who you are making love to as well. Like that, those two things don't go together. You're not supposed to do that. I had this notion in my mind that I never wanted to date someone who was like my dad, like that didn't know how to control his temper. All these things I'm thinking about while I'm going through these relationships where it seems like this person is doing things that is similar to the stuff that I saw my mom and dad doing. I never wanted to be like them because I saw what happened with them. When the abuse is over, it's not the end. Like, so much remnants that come afterwards that affect your psyche as a person can destroy somebody's life. And if you are one of these people that has this incessant rage and you don't know why, you keep taking it out on the people around you, everything they do that like pisses you off, you justify putting your hands on them to solve the problem. If you're one of those people, you have to really sit down dig deep inside your mind as to what from your past is making you so angry that you're taking out this anger physically on people who cannot defend themselves against you. That's the root problem. It's not that the person is evil. It's not that the person is just an asshole. They have a problem. They have some kind of emotional damage that needs to be sorted out. And it could be that this person is not ready to be in a relationship with other people, because you have to really know yourself and love yourself in order to love other people properly. In society, people don't have those kinds of standards for themselves. They're just like, whatever, I'm lonely, I want to fuck, so I'm gonna go get a boyfriend or a girlfriend. They don't think about how they have to treat that person, how each of you are individuals that have to have your own needs met in order to feel appreciated in the relationship. You don't think about that stuff. You just jump into a relationship because you like the person, you're attracted to each other, whatever, and then you just deal with the aftermath as it happens. My first exposure to domestic violence was at home with my parents. It was the norm for us, but at the same time I knew that it was wrong. I just didn't think that our family was capable of not being in that situation, because these were the choices that my parents were making that I had no control over. I was a child. I'm smart, so when I was young like that, I was able to make those distinctions somehow. Most kids probably aren't doing that. They're probably not able to process what's going on, even remotely. Some kids probably are blaming themselves and saying my parents hate each other because I did something wrong. I'm pissing them off in some way. And I never had those thoughts. I knew my parents were always dealing with their own issues. I just felt like they don't know how to deal with their issues any other way. So this is just something we have to put up with because this is my family. But I knew it wasn't normal because when I would be around my grandmother and my aunts and their families, they didn't react like my mom and dad did when they were upset with each other. They didn't shout and yell and flip out, and they didn't do stuff. They weren't violent. Nobody did drugs. Like I said, I didn't know that my dad did drugs when I was little, but as I got older, I started figuring things out. And I remember one time my dad took me up to this spot where we would park our car. It was after him and my mother had got into an argument, and he just took me out of the house to go up to the car with him. And I was sitting in the car with him, and he was like, don't tell your mom anything you saw me doing in this car. If she asks you what we were doing, just say we were talking or something or listening to music. And I remember having this feeling of my dad being really down, really sad. This sadness was just all over the car. And I was sad, and I was watching him rolling together something. And of course, now I know he was smoking a joint. But back then, my parents didn't smoke cigarettes, so I'm this isn't a cigarette, but that's the only thing I know of that you smoke. And he was just in the car, comforted that I was there in the car with him. And just the sadness, he was so overwhelmed with sadness. I could feel it all over us. And I was only I had to be 7 or 8 years old because I turned 9 when we moved to America. I don't side with either of my parents when it comes to this situation because I feel that both of them were at a disadvantage. My mother had her own dysfunctions that she was dealing with at the time, and my dad was still a very young man. He was only in his 20s at that time, I think. Maybe early 30s. So he was fresh to being an adult, like me. He had his own stuff that he was dealing with, and somehow he went down the road of becoming a drug addict and trying to function as a father and a husband. And as a father, my dad was on point. He showered us with affection and love and messages that he wanted us to, lessons that he wanted us to leave off with, that to this day, I still remember it. I will never forget my father because he was so impactful as a dad to me. He was a standard that I wanted my children's fathers to live up to. He was a very good father, but he wasn't that good of a husband when he was out of his mind on drugs and alcohol. I don't know what he was running away from, but he was. Like I said in the beginning of this video, this was not to be hey guys, let's all be sad and cry about things. No, I'm just saying these human beings are human beings. They have their good sides and their bad sides, but that doesn't mean that certain parts of someone's bad side you should subject yourself to just because you love the person. I think early on, my mother should have divorced my dad. I think that both of them should have mutually come to the conclusion they cannot change their behaviors with each other and just walked away from the relationship. Because they had an interracial marriage, I think it would have been a little bit hard for them to do that, because my mom's whole family was rooted in South Korea and my dad's was in the United States. If they were to share custody of us, like, how would that play out physically? Because where would we live? Like, we'd have to live somewhere, and my dad, he had no reason to just stay in Korea forever if he wasn't with my mom. So because I have a snippy tone, I bark a lot when I'm talking to my husband, sometimes when I'm like irritated about stuff, or if I feel like I'm repeating myself to him, or like he doesn't understand me, he's misunderstanding me, I will talk like that to him. And I picked that up myself from dealing with my own parents and watching how they interacted with each other. My mom, she's very snippy when she talks to people and kind of condescending when she talks to people, even when she's not mad. Like, that's just how she is. That stuff rubs off on the kids. People are so wrapped up on making money. We're so distracted by money problems that we forget, just community-wise, socially, how our society is developing as people. Too many people are going through these things, and it should not be happening so much. Us that are here, that are like leaders of our families, leaders of our communities, leaders of our sibling groups, you know, our friend groups, the ringleaders of the friends, I feel like we have a responsibility to our communities to help people to work through these emotional issues that they have, and not feel so fucking touchy and sensitive about delving into someone's psyche. Don't hold things in. If you are upset about something's bothering you, just let's talk about it. Like, you don't have to keep it to yourself all the time. Overthink and be all in your head, and then you're just mad, you know, because you think the world doesn't understand you, or you're alone in your problem, but you're not. This is the issue that a lot of people have. They don't feel safe just expressing themselves, just talking about their feelings. Let's not do that. All of us that are part of this experience right now, listening to the story that I'm talking about with you guys, it matters your mental health. Like, your sanity is what matters more. It's not so much that I want you guys to drop things in the comments for me. It's more for you to, like, express yourself, feedback. If something I said triggered a memory or a thought or an idea, drop it in the comments. Sometimes people just want someone to listen to them. That's it. Follow me on Instagram at Broken Dolly TV, and you're more than welcome to talk about stuff you hear on this channel there, even though that Instagram is supposed to be dedicated to my other YouTube channel. It's me. It doesn't matter. So you can still talk to me. You can DM me over there. I hope this is helping someone. Don't second guess yourself. Put a plan together of how you can get away from the situation, because I promise you, there's a way. There is a way. You're not trapped. There is a way. I'll talk to you guys later.